Welcome to the Cathedral's podcast, Crossroads. We explore the intersection of faith and the world in thought-provoking bi-monthly episodes featuring guests from around the world who are seeking to live faithfully in the public square. This is a safe space for tough questions around faith, politics, science, technology, and our responsibilities as citizens. Please join us as we search for a better way forward. On this episode of Crossroads, join us for a conversation with Senator Cory Booker and the Cathedral's Canon historian, Jon Meacham. Here are some highlights of that conversation.
We're in a cathedral that is in a fascinating in-between space, in culturally, not religiously or theologically, but culturally. A cathedral sitting on a hill overlooking a secular capital, an emblem of the eternal amid the temporal powers and principalities of the world. What do you think the soul of the country is? And give us an assessment of how you think we're doing. And I'll see y'all in about 20 minutes.
There is a chaplain named Samuel Colt from Passaic, New Jersey, who said something that I think cuts to the heart of the matter during the Civil War. He was being interviewed, and he asked the question that I think about a lot now. He said, "Are we a nation or have we a government?" I believe we are a nation, that we have shared values, common cause, and that we have a legacy, a lineage that connects us in every generation to chords that, to me, are still resonant bonds that should hold us together. Colt said this during the Civil War when we were being torn asunder, and he believed that more than the government of the United States, the buildings we see, the Constitution itself, but there's something deeper below that. And that's what I have, in many ways, dedicated myself to. I think we have a shared civic gospel that does stem from these imperfect geniuses that put our country forward. They broke with the course of human events and tried to found a nation in the best ideals of humanity. They literally debated the ideas of the Enlightenment, drew in the great philosophers, and tried to come up with a government that reflected this national, what they hoped to be a national yearning. Now, I like to think it starts first and foremost with the words of the Declaration of Independence. We're not founding this nation on a theology. We're not founding this nation on a divine right of kings and queens. In fact, we're rejecting that. We're founding this on the ideas that there is this greater wisdom and connectivity that comes from people. And the last words of the Declaration of Independence are a tribute to the highest of all values in humanity, I believe, and that is love. Because in the last word of the Declaration of Independence, they say if this nation is to make it, we must mutually pledge to each other our lives and our fortunes and our sacred honor. And so I will always put my faith in and my work towards trying to foster that sense of not just connection, but commitment to one another. That we are not, as much as we are a free market capitalist system, we're not some society that's going to become great because each one of us pursues our individual greed or yearnings or aspirations for material benefit. No, our country was founded on something deeper than that. And Adam Smith himself was a moral philosopher. And so I believe, if you ask me where we stand right now, is I think, as you and I have discussed before, that we are at yet another generational reckoning with that question, are we a nation or do we have a government? And what I am hoping for, because my faith tradition tells me that it's often in moments like this, weeping may endure through the night, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. This is a dark time in our country of deep divisions like that time in the Civil War. But I am a big believer. I have unyielding faith that joy will come in the morning, and that this in many ways is the moment that is actually setting us up to rekindle, to renew, to redeem that idea that we are a nation that shares a common civic gospel.
Politicians, all people, are, as Lincoln said, products of the incentives in their world. And how do we get the more sensible, the supra-partisan? Because I think more people, I don't like we're saying bipartisan because that suggests moral equivalence, but there are certain things that should be supra-partisan, above the ordinary struggles. How do you incentivize your colleagues? Because you mentioned the cell phones. I remember a moment, remember that old feature in Esquire many years ago, Signs of the Apocalypse, various things. One sign of the apocalypse for me was one of your former colleagues. I said, how did things get so divided? And he pulled out his cell phone and showed me his Twitter mentions. And he said, this is it. Because if I do something that's against the base, I immediately hear about it. From the base. I don't hear about it from the amorphous national interest. So how do those of us who believe, and we may be wrong, that we're in favor of a supra-partisan national interest, how do we make that clearer to the people who wield the elective power?
Well, there's two things I would say real quick. One on leaders like me, and then one on all of you. And look, the one on leaders like me, and I've had this conversation with my Democratic caucus, is, like you said, we need to tell a different story, and we need to find more creative ways of doing it. In the last election, I watched how Democrats got shellacked because they weren't even showing up on a lot of the platforms where people are. Most Americans now get their news from their handheld devices. And I went to Chuck Schumer and I said, this is a very bad situation. We need to find a way. I think for podcast downloads, like for every dozen that Donald Trump had, Senator Harris or Vice President Harris only had one. We didn't even show up where young people were, Discord and the gaming platforms, and I can go through that. And so a lot of this is tactical before I get to the larger strategic thing of trying to show up. When I was one of the early politicians in America that moved onto these social media platforms. As much as I think we should ban them for kids, period. I think they're like cigarette smoking. I'd like to see a lot more policy controlling them. I think that's true, but I am not going to, I'm one of the, at the time, especially one of the few senators on TikTok, because I learned when I was in Newark as the mayor during the Great Recession that I had to find a way to break through the noise of a nation that stereotyped inner cities, demeaned and degraded them or ignored them completely, and it didn't see what I saw, which is the city of abundance and possibility and promise. And so I knew I had to find a way to break through this media noise where people weren't paying attention. And I found a wonderful moment one night when I was sitting at home with my two best friends, Ben and Jerry, and
It's funny, my roommate in college was a guy named Jack Daniels. Maybe they know each other.
They might know each other. And I was watching The Tonight Show that I'd watched since on my grandfather's lap, watching Johnny Carson. And this Tonight Show host, a man named Conan O'Brien, comes on and says, I hear Newark, New Jersey has a new healthcare program. And I was really excited because we had done something to lower prescription drug prices for people in my city at participating pharmacies. But then he continued the joke. But I think the best healthcare program for the city of Newark is a bus ticket out of town. And I was like, oh. And I reached for my chubby hubby for comfort, but I realized, wait a minute, there's this new thing called Twitter. It was 2009. Ashton Kutcher and CNN just had their race to 1 million followers. So I went to City Hall and I recorded my own video where I said, I am the mayor of the city. Conan O'Brien has insulted our city. I bragged about our city. And I said, Conan, by the power vested in me by the people of the city of Newark, I hereby ban you from Newark Airport. You're on the no-fly list. Try JFK, buddy. And put the video out. And it went so viral, satellite trucks started lining up in front of my house. I got First Amendment absolutists calling me up saying, how could I violate Conan O'Brien's First Amendment rights? And I just went around. Suddenly, I was being invited on daytime talk shows and Larry King, and it got to be such a big story in America that the TSA felt, this is true, felt obliged to clarify on their website that mayors in America can't put people on no-fly lists. And then Conan O'Brien on The Tonight Show plays my video and responds angrily and says, by the power vested in me by the studio audience, I hereby ban Cory Booker from Burbank Airport, which I was like, who cares?
Yeah.
I go to LAX. I then banned him from the entire state of New Jersey. I would have banned him from listening to Bruce and Bon Jovi, our patron saints, but that would have been cruel and unusual punishment. It became the #1 trending story in America, our faux fight, until the one person on the planet Earth who was most in charge of healing rifts in war-torn countries, the Secretary of State for the United States of America, a woman named Hillary Clinton, filmed her own video where she said, in essence, Cory, Conan, give peace a chance. And next thing you know, I am standing behind the curtain I've watched all of my life. The mayor of a mid-sized American city that in years past, if they were upset about a joke, they could have written a letter, it would have been read by an intern's intern and thrown in the circular filing cabinet. Now I'm standing behind the Tonight Show curtain, it pulls back, I'm introduced, I walk onto the floodlight, sit next to Conan O'Brien, who apologizes to the people of the city of Newark and gives us $100,000 in charity. And I will tell you, I suddenly got callbacks from national foundations. I suddenly got developers from outside of my city to build our first hotel in 40 years and so on and so forth. Communications, how you communicate, how you tell your story, how you break through in a competitive environment. The 25 hours on the floor was a strategic decision to break through the noise at a time that we needed to. TikTok alerted us on their platform, they'd never seen anything like it. It got 340 million likes. And so tactically from my standpoint, before I get to your all responsibility, but from my standpoint, it is trying to find a way to tell not my story, but our story again, in these ways that the leaders I revere, people whose heights I will never achieve, but people like Martin Luther King stood before the nation and did not read a list of grievances. He didn't unveil a 5-point policy plan. He tapped into a deep chord that resonates with all of us. He redeemed the dream and got us all to see that nation again. That's to me the leaders, and I know many of them, that leave me in a sense of awe, reverence, but more importantly, inspire me to act. But your part is just as urgent, because you have a whole world of people that are trying to tell you that you don't have power to change the course of your country. And I'll give you one example of how what you do matters more than you'll ever imagine, and it comes to a date that you will know, and all the other nerds out there of history
and let's be clear, if they're here, they're nerds.
Yes. March 7th, 1965. My friend, you wrote a book about this moment.
Walking over the Alabama River on a bridge named for a dragon of the KKK.
A United States Senator, too.
Yep.
There is a white guy on a couch in New Jersey watching his TV on March 7th, 1965. And if you do have a young person next to you, hold them, because they may not know this history, but there was a time in America where we only had 3 channels. People were a lot better shaped back then because you had to get up to change them. And the birth rate was a lot higher back then because TV was done at 11 o'clock and you had to find something else to do. Guy on the couch watching TV, the movie that night. Do you know what the movie that night was?
I do, but you're on a roll.
Okay, the movie that night was the network premiere of Judgment at Nuremberg. And they broke away from it, from the horrors and the hate of the Holocaust, to see the horrors and the hate on this bridge over that river where John Lewis and those marchers got stopped by Alabama state troopers, tear gas, horses, billy clubs, Bloody Sunday. Now, what does one American do while he's watching? Well, his first instinct is, I got to go to Alabama. And then he slumps back down on his couch. He just started his law firm. He was out. He couldn't even afford a plane ticket, not to mention to close his business for a week or so. And then he does something so powerful. He says, I am not going to let my inability to do everything to undermine my determination to do something in the cause of my country in a moral moment. And what does he do? He says, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have where I am. And he does a calculation. And he finds that himself that he could afford one more hour pro bono work. He was already doing some, but one more hour, and he would dedicate it to the cause of civil rights in America. And since he was in New Jersey, he just called around, are there any civil rights organizations in New Jersey? He finds this organization led by a young woman named Lee Porter, who died this year at 98, while she still had the same job she had back then in 1965, which was the head of the Northern New Jersey Fair Housing Council. And the woman, Lee Porter's like, I need help. Thank you, Jesus, thank you. And he's like, okay, I'm here to help you. And the two of them design a sting operation that they would send, New Jersey is one of the top most segregated states at that point, they would send black families into white neighborhoods to see if they could buy houses, and they would be turned away, and then they would send a volunteer white couple behind them to see if the house was really sold or off the market like they were told. And they began over the years exposing all of this housing discrimination, getting it in stories. Years pass, it's now 1969, and this guy, this lawyer, gets this case file from a family moving up from the South, looking for a home. They'd been turned away over and over again in the nicer suburbs with great public schools, and they go to work. They send the black couple out to a new home. They fall in love with the home, but they're told it was sold. The white couple comes after them, finds out the house is still for sale, puts a bid on the house under instructions from the black couple. The bid is accepted, papers are drawn up, and on the day of the closing at the real estate agent's office, the white couple does not show off. Black man, lawyer Marty Friedman. They walk into a real estate agent's office. Sounds like a good joke. A black man and a Jew walk into a real estate agent's office.
There's one parachute.
Yes. Immediately, the real estate agent recognizes the black man, sees he's caught. The lawyer starts to go into a speech about the violation of New Jersey fair housing law. It's now against the federal law, 1968 fair housing law, but he doesn't get that far into his speech because the real estate agent stands up and punches Marty Friedman in the face, sigs his dog on the black man, and the two have to fight their way out. And then they start writing letters. The owners of the home, horrified, find out what's going on, agree to sell the home to the black family. Mother, father, 2-year-old, and a 4-month-old. 43 years later, the baby goes on to be America's only 4th black person ever elected to the United States Senate, me. I am here, and everything that I'm doing, because one American didn't just sit on the couch and treat our democracy like a spectator sport. They got up and said, what is my sacred offering to this moral moment? We all have that power right now by what we choose to do in this moral moment when so many of our neighbors are hurting, so many of our neighbors are afraid, so many of our neighbors are staring at a document on their desk or a computer screen and seeing that their health care is going to be so much that they have to make the terrible choice of who in their family will go without health care so that our children can keep it. This is a moral moment, and it demands more of us to say, this is not the democracy that I want. There is a corruption, there is cancer, there is hurt, and there's harm, but the only way to get rid of it is what you told me in that first meeting, is that for more and more of us to stand up, and for every one of us that stands up, even though our legs shake and our voice breaks, every single one of us stands up, we will ignite another to do the same, and before you know it, we have a greater and greater movement for change.
What gives you hope?
Look, I'm a kid from the suburbs, those wealthy suburbs that those lawyers helped my family move into. And my dad used to look at me as a kid and say, boy, don't you dare walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base. And my dad, every time he would tell the story, the dog in that story would get bigger. Eventually he had to fight a pack of wolves to get us in that house. And my father watched all-American football player, scholarship to Stanford, graduate school, overseas, coming back to Yale Law School, but he never was satisfied. He said to me, I'm graduating from Yale. He's like, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. Life ain't the degrees you get, it's the service you give. And the best thing I ever did, following a dream I had, my mom asked me when I didn't know what to do, she goes, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I decided to write a list of my heroes in America down because I was gonna model myself after one of them. Brian Stevenson was on that list, Marin Wright Edelman was on that list, but the guy I eventually decided to pattern my life over after, and this is the old saying, the best way to make God laugh is to make plans for yourself, because not long later I would turn into a politician, but was a guy named Jeffrey Canada, who moved into the most dangerous neighborhood he can find in Harlem and started this extraordinary nonprofit that transformed blocks in Harlem, charter schools and healthcare. It was unbelievable what Jeffrey did. He was one of Clinton's People of Hope and MacArthur Genius Grant. So I picked a neighborhood that people perceived as extraordinarily dangerous in the central ward of Newark. I live about 100 or so yards, still from there now. The only senator that lives in a black and brown neighborhood that I still think, even though it's improved so much, is still below the poverty line. And when I was there, I was stunned by what I saw. Open air drug dealing. I was living next to a crack house. First time I ever saw people huddling in the back and doing intravenous drug use. And at that point, I met my greatest life professor. I got my BA from Stanford, but my PhD on the streets of Newark, a woman named Miss Virginia Jones, tenant president, about 5 feet tall, elderly woman. And I went to her, I was coming out of my last year of law school, and I knocked on the door as if I was some hero from a John Wayne movie, and I go, ma'am, little Philly, I'm here to help you. And she looks at me like I need all the help in the world, and she was right. And I told her and everything, and she did this experiment where she walked me down to Martin Luther King Boulevard in the middle of the street, and she says to me, if you want to help me, tell me what you see in this neighborhood. And I go, what do you mean? She goes, describe my neighborhood. And I described it just as dark as I described it a few minutes ago. Drug dealing, projects, crack house. And the more I talked, the more angry she looked at me. And then she walks away, saying to me in a huff, you can't help me. And so I run after her, I grab her from behind very respectfully, and I go, I don't understand. And she goes, boy, you need to understand something. The world you see outside of you is a reflection of what you have inside of you. If you're one of these people who looks at my neighborhood and all you see is problems, darkness, and despair, that's all there's ever gonna be. But if you're one of those stubborn people who every time you open your eyes, you see hope, you see possibility, you see love, you see the face of God, she goes, then you can help me. And she leaves me there looking at my feet, thinking to myself, okay, grasshopper, thus endeth the lesson. I would go on to sit at her feet, watch lines of people from the projects, Brick Towers was I would eventually move in, would just wait and to see her, and she would solve people's problems. She taught me about politics. She knew the city council person. She knew she could deliver these blocks of votes. She got things done. She helped people. She battled with people. She was amazing. But when I would eventually move into the buildings to live on the top floor of these decaying projects, someone told me that her son was murdered in the lobby. A veteran came home and somebody shot and killed him in the lobby, pulled her down to see her son bleeding into the lobby floor. And it was the 80s, this was long past that, but I asked her why would she still live here? I knew where she worked, I knew that she could live other places, and she looked at me and she said, Riley, she said, why am I still here? I go, yes. She goes, why am I still in apartment 5A? I go, yes. She goes, why am I still the tenant president of these buildings since the day they were built in 1969? I go, yes, ma'am. And she goes, because I am in charge of Homeland Security. She didn't wait for a presidential appointment, for a cabinet position, a title. That was the kind of love she had. And so when you ask me about hope, I'm telling you, I learned hope from Miss Virginia Jones. That real hope immediately makes you vulnerable. That real hope has scars. It has wounds. It's been fractured over and over, but yet every single day it stands up and hopes again. Real hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. Right now, if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. But for any of us to not answer the despair we feel with hope is surrender. Hope is our defiance. Hope is our shield. Hope is the only way to be. We have to be an agent of hope. And if anything, hope can always be found working.
Our next episode will be a special conversation about food, faith, and community, just in time for Thanksgiving. Join our friend Kevin Ekstrom and the Cathedral's Canon for Mission Leonard Hamlin as they sit down with Matthew Bounds, also known as your barefoot neighbor. A major TikTok influencer, Matthew is so much more. His cookbook, Keep It Simple, Y'all, is a New York Times bestseller. Leonard, Kevin, and Matthew talk about the power of simple recipes, faith, and new friendships as people gather round food and fellowship in today's polarized times. Thank you for listening to Crossroads, and until next time, many blessings. If the digital offerings of the Cathedral enrich your daily life, please consider becoming a supporter today by making a gift at cathedral.org/inspire.